Good evening, Robert, and everyone subscribed. My name is John. I live in Austin, Texas, and I want to share a story that happened to me and my family while we were traveling from Dallas to Austin. To this day, it remains unexplained. The year was 2019, and I was 25 at the time. I am originally from Dallas and moved to Austin in 2014 to seek better job opportunities, as the city was growing and full of new prospects. My wife is from Austin, so we decided to move here. It was a good time. We quickly found jobs, and thank God, we have been living here for 10 years. At the time of the story, we didn't have any children yet. It was just me, my wife, and my mother-in-law. My brother, Michael, lived in rural Texas, where job opportunities were scarce. After much discussion with our mother, we decided that I would go pick up my brother to live with us in Austin and find a job here. Our car at the time was a black 2013 Chevrolet Suburban, a good car for this kind of trip and also automatic, but it consumed a lot of gas. We left Austin around 3 p.m. after my wife got off work. The trip was smooth. We put on a selected playlist and enjoyed the scenery of the Texas countryside. There were beautiful hills and ranches along the way. As we crossed the hilly region of hill country, we noticed even more crosses along the road. This area is known for being very dangerous, requiring drivers to be very attentive. Eventually, we crossed the border between Texas and Oklahoma around 11:30 p.m. We passed through a small town called Altus, Oklahoma, and as we were leaving Altus, we saw some people lying on the ground, apparently injured. I think it must have been an accident. What was strange was that the vehicles were old, not matching the current time. But it could be because we were in a rural area and there were people from the countryside around. We continued driving, and a few meters ahead, we saw a kind of memorial with several crosses. Since there were people providing help, we decided not to stop because it was already very late, and we still needed to find a place to sleep and continue the trip in the morning. Early the next morning, we set off again. We left Oklahoma and arrived in Arkansas. Anyone who travels along I-40 knows that there's a part of this highway that is terrible, full of potholes, which delays the trip a lot. Plus, there were several people patching potholes to earn some money, which was heartbreaking. Around 9 p.m., thanks to God, we arrived in Little Rock. We spent 2 days there because we couldn't stay long. My wife had only taken a few days off work, and we needed to return as quickly as possible without making stops to sleep. Since my brother Michael knew how to drive and had a license, we would take turns driving. We left Little Rock at dawn heading to Austin. We bought several energy drinks to have energy for this long trip. By late morning, we stopped at a gas station in the middle of Arkansas and filled up the car. Dear friends, that was the worst thing we did. But there was no way to predict it. They put adulterated gasoline in the car, and a bit further on, it started having issues. I can't count how many times we had to stop to get the car running again and keep going. What was supposed to be a smooth trip turned into a nightmare. And hold on, it gets worse. My wife called her job to inform them of what happened and that she wouldn't be able to make it the next day. But her boss said that if she didn't arrive on the agreed day, she would have to go to HR to sign the termination letter. She then panicked and said she would be there the next day. We became even more worried about the situation. As night fell, we were still in Little Rock. The trip, which should have been quick, became extremely slow due to the car's issues. It was past midnight when we left Little Rock. Shortly after hitting the road, a woman in dirty clothes appeared, signaling for us to stop. But we didn't stop. Firstly, because it could be a robbery, and secondly, because if the car had issues again, we would have to wait about half an hour for it to start again. We ignored it and kept going. 5 minutes later, we saw the same woman signaling and asking for a ride again. Everyone in the car was stunned by what we saw. My mother-in-law, who is a devout Christian, immediately said, "The blood of Jesus has power." We were all incredulous. Until, almost reaching Texarkana, the car had issues again. This time, We were all scared that the apparition would show up. We stayed inside the car, and my mother-in-law prayed the whole time. When I looked ahead, I saw that monument with several crosses, like a kind of memorial on the road. We all remained silent. No one dared to get out of the car. Then someone knocked on the car window. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest from the scare. It was a humble man asking if we needed help. We were apprehensive, thinking it could be a robbery, but we talked to him through the partially opened window and explained the car's issue. He said, "You're lucky. I'm a mechanic. I was heading home when I saw your car stopped and figured you might need help." Given the situation, my brother Michael and I got out of the car and illuminated the engine with our phones. The man began inspecting the car and mentioned that the adulterated gasoline was causing the problems. He said we would need to drain that gasoline and clean it out, but that it wouldn't be an immediate fix. However, he assured us that the car would make it home. Michael and I were surprised because, up until that moment, we didn't know what was wrong with the car. And how did he know the issue was the gasoline without any equipment to test it? Anyway, he closed the hood of the Suburban, and we asked how much he wanted for the service. He said no payment was necessary because God provides. My wife and mother-in-law thanked the kind man profusely. He walked off toward Texarkana until he disappeared into the darkness. We got back in the car, and thank God, it started. My wife had an idea. "Guys, it's not going to be possible for me to open the store tomorrow. As soon as we get to Austin, I'll get a medical certificate and let's see if my boss will fire me because of that." Then my mother-in-law added, "Also, it was God who sent this man to help us. Let's find a nearby hotel and rest. What if the car breaks down again and we don't find another kind person to help us?" We all agreed to sleep in a hotel and spend the rest of the night there. A few minutes ahead, there was a hotel right there in Texarkana, on the same road. We asked for a room for 4 people and went to sleep, exhausted from the trip. The next morning, we went to have breakfast. While in the dining area, I asked one of the hotel owners if he knew of any workshop that could quickly fix our car. He replied that he did and asked what the problem was. At that moment, I explained our situation. I also mentioned the woman who appeared twice asking for a ride, and the man who helped us get the car running. The hotel owner gave me a strange look and asked where it happened. I told him it was at the entrance to Texarkana, coming from Little Rock, and I mentioned the place with several crosses on the roadside. Then he said, "Friends, I don't know you, and apparently, you don't know the story of the disaster either." The 4 of us looked at him, puzzled. Then the hotel owner began to tell us, "What you saw were the souls of the victims of a disaster. I'll try to explain what happened at that location. In the 1950s, a bus collided head-on with a truck, and several people died. Even the mayor of a neighboring town was on the bus. It was very sad. Few people survived that tragedy. The place where you were is known for a woman appearing, asking for a ride. When someone stops, she gets in the car and disappears shortly after. It's also common for a man to offer his services as a mechanic. It's not just that. Some people see figures on the roadside crying and asking for help as if an accident had just happened. Once, a friend of mine asked the souls of the disaster to help her get a job. She promised to light 2 packs of candles if they helped her, and she did get the job, but she only brought 1 pack of candles. That night, several souls came to collect the remaining pack of candles from her, and the next day she took what was missing. I was speechless at that moment and remembered the accident we had seen when we were heading to Dallas. My mother-in-law immediately said, "This is the work of the devil." My wife, my brother, and I were very disturbed and lost our appetite. Right after, we grabbed our things and went to the workshop. And guess what? The mechanic was right. There was a lot of adulterated and low-quality fuel in the area. The mechanics mitigated the situation, and we hit the road home. We spent the entire trip questioning why we saw those apparitions. Thank God, the Suburban didn't have any more problems, and we managed to get to Austin by late afternoon. My wife quickly got a medical certificate to take to her job. We were all amazed by what we experienced on that trip. My brother now has a family, and I